Welcome to In Our Generation. I know that we've been gone for a few days. I've been slammed with work and haven't had the time to put into this, but we are back, and we are back for the first show in the last month of 2020, if that means anything to you. I don't think it means anything, actually, because neither the virus nor all your bad luck, nor the sun or the moon or the stars, nor Earth has any clue what a random number or arbitrary number like 2020 means. But for those of you that are superstitiously inclined, we are in the last month of 2020. So you can rest at ease, you can breathe easily, and get ready to coast into the unparalleled beauty that will be 2021. That's where we're headed. We have a whole lot to get to today. A number of news stories that I've been looking at throughout the week and have been interesting to me. And so let's get right into it. I found it humorous that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, otherwise known as AOC, is selling sweatshirts and t-shirts, swag, merchandise, and apparel that have slogans like "tax the rich." And she is selling them for about $68 per sweatshirt, which is very interesting. I wonder where that money is going. Maybe that is the tax on the rich. The sweatshirts are the tax on the rich, perhaps. But aside from the obvious hypocrisy, obvious misunderstanding, let's be charitable, of AOC availing herself of capitalism to decry capitalism, to punish capitalism. Aside from that, the message itself of taxing the rich is such an interesting one to me. It's interesting to me because of who supports it and who opposes it. The majority of the people who oppose taxing the rich, you would think would be the rich people. You would think that the very rich people would be Republicans and would be small government Republicans, would be low taxation Republicans. That is not the case. The rich are overwhelmingly Democratic. They vote for Democrats who campaign on promises of raising taxes on the rich and making the rich pay their fair share. And those that are generally opposed to that tend to be middle to lower class. So that's very interesting. Why is it, do you think, that the rich are not on board with don't tax the rich, or that the rich are overtaxed? Why would that be? Well, if we examine the tax code, both current and historically, we find out that the rich have a dirty little secret. And that is that they vote for and campaign on and promote the idea of the rich paying higher taxes. And yet, in reality, they never pay higher taxes. If we look at the actual tax rate, what they call the nominal tax rate, what's the tax rate that actually is on the IRS forms, what they say the tax rate is supposed to be. Well, that tax rate has fallen dramatically over the years. Give you an example. In World War II, the tax rate, the highest bracket income tax rate, was like 94%. 94%. Now, that doesn't mean that they take 94% of every penny you earn. That's often how it is mischaracterized or misunderstood by people generally who don't pay taxes. So if a person's is mostly not paying taxes because they don't work very hard or they don't make very much money, then they tend to think 94%. They're going to charge 94% of every dollar a person makes. No, actually, you pay 94% on every dollar after a threshold. So if you make, let's say, these aren't the actual numbers, but let's say you make $1 million. then you're going to pay 94% on every dollar after you make your first $1 million, or wherever that is set. And every tax bracket has an amount that you're able to make before that tax bracket kicks in. So it's not exactly 94%, but it's still, that's a very high tax rate at any point. If at any point you reach a level of income where the government decides that you should only keep 6 cents on the dollar, that is a high tax rate. And that's what it was in World War II. And so you would think that all the very rich people were paying a lot of taxes. You would be wrong. You would be wrong. The effective tax rate of the very wealthy during that time was essentially the same as it is now. Effective tax rate means the tax rate that they actually pay. When everything's said and done and when everything comes out in the wash, it's what you actually pay. And why would it be less or more? Well, you have deductions, you have what they call loopholes. Loopholes is a inflammatory term meant to prejudice you against those who are using the full tax code. A loophole is simply is not illegal. There's nothing immoral, illegal, or unethical about it. So when you keep your receipts to deduct that from your income taxes, when you ask your church to give you a charitable gift receipt so you can deduct that from, that's a loophole. Everyone who does that is using a loophole. If you give money to the Red Cross and they send you a receipt and you deduct that from your taxes, that's a loophole. If you take off your mortgage interest from your taxes because the IRS allows you to deduct that, or other types of interest, that's a loophole. They're all loopholes. So the word loophole really is not accurate. What it is it's tax deductions that you are allowed to take. And so when you go back to those 94% rates in the World War II and you check to how much they actually paid after they fully implemented the legal tax code, well, it's about the same as it is now. It hasn't changed hardly at all. In other words, the rich really don't care if you raise the tax rates because they are going to lobby to get in the tax deductions. And so it's essentially a political move. It is a PR move for the rich to be in favor of higher taxes. And it is really incredible. It is really interesting to me that they have the poor fighting the fight of lowering taxes. It's reminiscent of the South when only 10% of Southerners actually owned slaves, and yet somehow they bamboozled the other 90% of Southerners to go out and die in the battlefields to protect the slave trade. Even though they themselves and their children would probably never own slaves, but they went and bled and died in the battlefields in order to preserve slavery. And it seems a lot like that. All these middle to low income Republican voters who are a large portion of the party, if not a majority of the Republican Party, are dying on the hill of lower taxation when they themselves are never going to pay those taxes. And if they ever reach a point where they would be taxed at those higher rates, they would also have better tax attorneys who would be more aware of ways to avail themselves of the tax code. And so their effective tax rate would be about 40%. So whether we call it 40% or whether it's actually 40%, it doesn't really make much of a difference. Now, when we look at taxes and who pays the taxes, it's interesting also that even though the tax rate has fallen dramatically and the effective tax rate, in other words, what we actually pay, has stayed basically the same since, let's say, the early 1900s, the percentage of taxes paid by the highest earners has increased. So when the nominal tax rate was 94% in World War II, or when it was like 70% in 1979, or when it's 37% today, the actual percentage of total taxes collected paid by the highest earners has gone up, not down. Now, that's because they're earning more in relationship to the lower ones. And that's what they call the income inequality. Income inequality is about whether or not the highest earners are earning how much more they're earning proportionally or in percentage to the lower earners. That's your income inequality rating that they always talk about. It doesn't mean that the lower income earners aren't earning more than they used to or more than they would have in previous circumstances. It just means that the higher earners are earning more in proportion to the lower earners, that gap has increased, which for many people, that seems to be very important. But that's an envy matrix, right? That's you are measuring envy when you do that. Who cares if the highest earners earn much more than the lower earners in proportion to the lower earners than they did in World War II? When would you prefer to be a lower earner? Would you prefer to be a low-wage earner in World War II or right now? When do you think the lives of the lower earners was better? Well, I think now. If we had a time machine and every single person got to choose to go live at a time with their exact income, right? Their relative income, adjusted for dollars. So obviously you don't get to take back your $1,000 every 2-week paycheck back to 1930. Well, obviously anyone would want to do that. But if you could go back and live in that same bracket at any time in history, when is it best to live in your income bracket? Right now. There's no better time to live in your income bracket than right now. Right now is the best time. Now, that may not always be true. Okay, I'm not saying that this is always true, that every day is better than the last day. We may very well get into a period when our best days are behind us and we're in decline. That could certainly happen. But as of right now, the best time to be a low-income person, a middle-income person, is right now. There's no better day to be middle class than right now. So the income inequality accounts for why the wealthy, even though their nominal tax bracket is much lower than it ever had, than it was, I shouldn't say ever, but than it was during, let's say, FDR or where it was under Jimmy Carter, even though that's true, they're still paying the majority of the taxes. So the top 1% of wage earners paid 38.5% of all income tax. So 1% of the people paid 38.5% of all the taxes. The bottom 90% paid 30% of all taxes. So 90% of the people that pay taxes in this country pay less percentage of the total tax receipts than the top 1%. Now that is a statistic that the tax the rich crowd generally don't want to talk about. And just so you know, the top 50% of all wage earners paid 97% of all income taxes. So the bottom 50% of the country, of the taxpayers. Now, that's very critical to understand. We're talking about everyone who files income tax. There is a huge number of people in this country who don't even file income tax. We're not even counting them. We're only counting the people that actually pay something in taxes. The bottom 50% of those who actually pay something in taxes only pay 3% of the total tax bill of the country. The top half of the country pays all the rest. So I would say that we're taxed very fairly. Very fairly. I would say they keep talking about the rich paying their fair share, but that seems pretty fair. That seems pretty fair. You say, well, they're just making so much more. Oh, that's true. And how is that? And how does that affect you? Why are you worried about how much they're making? Do you think that somehow takes money from you? See, this is the problem of people. that are on the tax the rich train. That they think that when somebody makes a lot of money, they do so by taking money away from everyone else. It is the cliche example. The cliche example of this is the pie. They think that when somebody makes a lot of money, that means they took a big piece of the pie. See, they take income as being taking something out of the economy, as that you are extracting something from the economy. That isn't how it works. Income is when you put something into the economy. When a person makes $1 million in 1 year, he didn't take $1 million out of the economy. That's what he put into the economy. Because we are the economy. When you get money in your bank, that's in the economy. You now have money to do something with. That money's, where do you think, when we talk about the economy and putting money in the economy, what do you think the economy is? We're the economy. Every one of us, every person's the economy. When a rich person gets money, when a poor person gets money, whoever makes money gets money from income. Because they worked, they are putting into the economy. So when a rich person gets a ton of money, they didn't take a big piece of the pie. There are no pieces of the pie when it comes to this context. What they did is they added to the pie. The pie got that much bigger. And if you were to somehow figure out a way to make more money, you wouldn't be taking money from anybody. You would be adding money to the economy. The pie would be growing. Do you think there could have been a person that had $150 billion in the days of George Washington? No, because it didn't exist. In order for that to happen, there would have had to have been an incredible increase in the economy. So when people today are making bukus of cash, bukus of money legitimately, legally, they're not taking it from you. You don't have to worry if Jeff Bezos has $160 billion. That doesn't affect you in any negative way. At the very best, it affects you in a positive way. Whether he pays taxes or not, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You are perfectly capable of making whatever money that fits your skill set and ambition and work ethic, with complete disregard for who makes how much else. There is not a set amount of money to be made. As we all make more money, there is more money to be made. If I have $5,000 total, and that's my entire net worth, and you're going to work for me, how much money do you think you're going to be able to make if I'm your sole source of income? Well, certainly not more than $5,000. And if I have any ambition of eating today, not even that much. So the best interest for you is for your employer to have a lot of money. The more money he makes, the more money you can make. The more money you make, the more money the people who work for you make. Like your lawn care people, or your health care people, or your dental care people, or your child care people, or your maintenance people, or anybody else. People that might want to build you your house someday. Everybody who will ever offer you a good or a service in exchange for money is a lot better off if you have more of it. And therefore, you're better off if the people that you work for have more money as well. Now, do some people avoid taxes like the plague? We all avoid taxes like the plague. Everybody does. Everybody does. Sure, I would prefer a flat tax system where everyone paid a flat tax with no deductions. Flat tax, no deductions. Everyone pays 15% or 17% of their total income, no deductions. You just figure it. You get this little form. It's a little card, and it says you made X amount of dollars. You made $50,000 this year. This is your taxes on $50,000. 15% of your taxes. There it is. It'd be like sales tax. Everyone pays a flat sales tax. Imagine if you went to the store And before they figured out your sales tax, they had to calculate how many kids you can claim. They had to calculate how much money you gave to charity. They calculated all those. You know how long the checkout line would be at the grocery store if sales tax was figured out that way, if it wasn't a flat tax? It would be terrible. We need a flat income tax. Just one flat tax. Everyone pays it, and there are no deductions. There are no quote-unquote loopholes. All right. So if you are on board with Tax the Rich, AOC has a sweatshirt for you. You should go on her website. I think it's AOC.com, but you have to look it up. You can go on her website and you can order yourself a Tax the Rich sweatshirt and walk around and show your ignorance. Show your ignorance. And speaking of hypocrisy, have you noticed all of the government hypocrites who have been caught enjoying their freedom while you were on lockdown? Just recently, the mayor of Austin joined the club, joined the Hypocrites Club. The mayor of Austin put out a heartfelt video admonishing and pleading with his fellow Austonians. I think that's the metronym for Austin, people who live in Austin, for the People's Republic of Austin. He put out a heartfelt plead. Please stay home. Please combat the virus. Don't go out. Stay in your home. And he filmed it in Cabo, Mexico, Los Cabos. He filmed it in Los Cabos, where he flew there in a private jet with a crew of people. So here he is enjoying not only the beach and going to the beach, and not only that, but with a lot of people, but in a different country who has a real issue, a real problem with COVID infections. Telling you that you need to stay home, and he has the gall to film it. No, he didn't film it from the beach. That would have been better. I mean, if you're going to go hypocrite, you need to go full-on hypocrite. Go full-on hypocrite. And film it from the beach. He should have filmed it from the beach, right? With the beautiful Pacific in the background, and he could film the thing and all the people around him, no one wearing a mask, and everyone in their swimsuits and bikinis, and film it and say, you people, you little people, you dirty, infected, disease-ridden little people need to stay home. Need to stay home so we don't all die from COVID. And this is just one more on a long list of the hypocrites who are violating their own orders. Now, some of them technically are not violating anything, right? So you have some of the governors who've been caught, the day before they put on the lockdown, they go out and have one last big hoorah at a restaurant with a whole bunch of people. Because they know, right, they're trading on inside information. If it were stock buys, they'd be in jail. But because it's government mandates, they can get away with this, right? It's not illegal, even though it's entirely unethical. If you're the governor and you know that the next day you're going to sign a lockdown order, a mandate to wear masks or to not eat at restaurants, so you go out having that inside information to go enjoy the last day that you can unhypocritically go to a restaurant, that's entirely unethical and immoral. Well, that's what they do also, and they get caught that way. Now, if I was a governor and I really believed that COVID was of such such a dire situation, of such dire danger to the health of everybody, including myself, well, what's the difference between the day of the mandate and the day before the mandate? Does science tell us that COVID waits for the lockdown mandates to take effect before it really gets virulent, before it really starts to be dangerous? Of course not. If you believe that COVID is a terribly, terribly dangerous, deathly disease, and I'm not arguing that it is or it isn't, but if you were to believe that's the case, well, it's the case the day before the mandate. It's the case 2 days before the mandate, right? So if you believe that and that's why you're instituting that mandate, well, then you should definitely not be going out to a restaurant for your own well-being, right? Just so you can survive the plague. You should not be going out to a restaurant the day before the mandate. And yet here they are. We find them. There's video and pictures of them sitting there in restaurants with huge groups of people, nobody wearing masks. It doesn't seem like these governors imposing these lockdowns are all that persuaded themselves of the danger of the disease or the merit of the lockdown. It seems, I mean, I know I'm way out there on this, but it seems as if they're playing politics. Who knows? Who knows? I mean, stranger things have happened than politicians playing politics and imposing rules and laws that they themselves actually do not firmly believe in. And then going on TV and selling those rules as if they do. It would almost seem as if politicians are actors. Maybe. Now that we're on the topic of hypocrisy, let's take hypocrisy for 1,000. So New Mexico has gone completely blue, or practically completely blue. Its federal delegation is blue, its government is blue, and its state legislature is practically entirely blue. I mean, the whole state has gone almost blue. It is running up close to California in just how blue it is, perhaps even more. And the newly elected blue governor of New Mexico was elected partially on a promise of giving free college. Free college. Now, everybody who wants free college ought to consider moving to New Mexico. New Mexico, the governor said, we're going to give free. College is a human right. College is a human right. And therefore, it can't cost. We are going to guarantee free college. However, no sooner does he get elected, no sooner does that governor get elected, and fracking dies, right? That's where we're at. The oil prices are at all-time lows. It wasn't long ago that they were actually paying people to take the oil, right? So how much does oil cost? You go and say, I want to buy a barrel of oil. How much does a barrel of oil cost? They're like, no. We'll pay you. If you'll take it, we will pay you. Well, it's very hard to sell a fracking investment when oil is that cheap, right? Because fracking is still more expensive than just normal petroleum drilling. So it's very hard to sell fracking and for fracking to be profitable when oil is being given away. So fracking dies. All of a sudden, free college dies with it. Because where do you think New Mexico was planning on getting the money for free college? Because news alert, right? I need to get a little news alert banner on my on IOG, right? Beep, 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 beep. News alert. Breaking news. When the government says things are free, they're not actually free. Someone actually has to pay for them. So where was New Mexico going to get the money to pay for free college? They were going to get it from fracking. Now, don't you find that just deliciously humorous? I mean, is there anything funnier? Is there anything more humorously ironic than a dyed-in-the-wool blue governor, no doubt completely on board with the Green New Deal, giving free college, the greatest accomplishment of liberalism today, free college paid for by fracking. I mean, how hypocritical can you get? We are going to give free college because we're going to use fracking to do it. Oh, that's funny. Now that is funny. I thought fracking was bad. I thought fracking was the end of civilization. I thought fracking was the process invented by Satan himself. And now they're bemoaning the fact that it's dead. They should be happy. I mean, wouldn't you leftists out there, wouldn't you gladly sacrifice your free college if it meant the death of fracking? I mean, is that a price too big to pay? I think not. I think not. So congrats to the leftists. They got their wish. Fracking's dead. And congrats to the people on the right. You got your wish. No more free college. Now, weren't we both happy? I mean, this is an example of win-win. The right hates free college. The left hates fracking. Kill fracking. There's no money for free college. You both get what you want. I mean, can we all come together on that? Can that be the Unity Party's platform? Kill fracking, kill free college. Everybody gets what they want. Everybody gets what they want. Speaking of government strategies, have you noticed that I'm going to say something here that Christians are going to find very offensive. That's why the tagline of my podcast is offending all the right people. I need to put that right up on the opening screen. Offending all the right people. I have a penchant for offending Christians. And what I'm about to say is probably going to offend some Christians. Have you noticed that the government is pursuing Joseph's strategy? Modern liberal government is essentially just an extrapolation of Joseph's strategy that he used to, quote unquote, save the Egyptians, save the world from famine. I know, and this is where Christians are probably get offended, because you're not supposed to criticize Joseph, right? Because Joseph in the Bible, for those that don't read the Bible, you don't know what I'm talking about because you're a bunch of pagans. But go read Genesis and you'll know who Joseph is. So Joseph in the Bible, he's the one person that doesn't seem to have any sins told on him in the Bible. At least a person with any substantial amount of text dedicated to him. Maybe there's somebody who's mentioned by name, obviously doesn't give us. But if it tells us anything about their life, the Bible points out the sins, the errors, the peccadillos of all its characters, right? With the exception of Jesus and some say Joseph. Now, that's disputed because it appears that Joseph tells a little white lie in when he's asking Pharaoh to give his family land. It seems like he might be telling a little white lie, and in that case you can say, well, then Joseph sinned there. But other than that, what is one lie between you and me? I mean, honestly, between you and me, what's one little white lie? So let's put that one aside, and we could say that many Christians see Joseph as being the best type, the best example of Jesus Christ. And so you're not supposed to criticize Joseph. You're supposed to admire Joseph, and everything he did is wonderful. But when you're looking at it from a free market economic perspective, Joseph's strategy is very disconcerting. For those that don't know how it went, let me explain it briefly. Joseph's strategy to save Egypt from the famine that he prophesied was going to come was to tax the entire country during the plenteous years, taxed everybody. So he collected everybody's grain and a percentage of everybody's grain, and they storehoused it. He built huge storehouses, huge silos or granaries, and they stored all that grain. So that when the 7 years of plenty ran out and the 7 years of famine started, then they started selling people back the grain that they had taxed them of. So the government owned all the grain that was there. There's no harvest now. 7 years of plenty. Everybody's walking in high cotton or high wheat or whatever it is they were planting in those days. But they were all flush for 7 years. And when the 7 years ran out, obviously most people did not store away enough for 7 years of famine. They're like most of us, right? You have 7 good years. You have every penny you've made is hanging on your wall in the form of a television. It's sitting on your desk in the form of a computer. It's parked in your driveway in the form of car rentals, car leases, or car payments. Right? We spend every penny we get. And that's just what the Egyptians did for 7 years. When the 7 years of plenty, when all that wonderful plenty ran out and the 7 years of famine started, well, now they don't have anything to eat. Everything's dry and dead and they have nothing to eat. They didn't put aside their own. And so they go to Joseph, and Joseph has taxed them and he's put aside. So now he starts to sell them back what he had taken from them. He didn't give it back. He started to sell it back. And when they ran out of money, what did Joseph do? He took their land. And the only people left in Egypt who had private property at the end of those 7 years of famine were the priests. The Egyptian priests were the only ones who got to keep their private property. Joseph taxed the people and then used their taxes to take over the entire country. And Pharaoh owned the country, and the entire Egyptian population went from being prosperous private landowners to serfs of the Pharaoh. Now, doesn't that sound like what modern totalitarian progressive government is all about? So no, I don't admire Joseph for the strategy. Sure, it's great if you're Pharaoh. Sure, if you're Pharaoh, well, that's great strategy. You know, in 7 years, you'll not only be wealthy from selling people back their own stuff that you took from them, but you also will own the entire country. Sounds like a great deal if you're Pharaoh. Now, you can say, well, but he saved these people from starvation. That's true. So you have to calculate, what is the cost of self-reliance? What is the cost of being able to determine your own fate, to own your own property? Now, under Moses' law, that would not have been legal. Moses did not allow for a father to jeopardize the inheritance that God gave his family. So if he did sell off his land, that land had to be returned after a certain period and given back to the children. So Moses' law did not allow the poor behavior, the poor choices, the prodigal fathers. For those that don't know what prodigal means, you need to go look that up. It does not mean lost or rebellious. It did not allow for the prodigal fathers to ruin the future of their children. But Pharaoh's law did. Pharaoh's law is like our law, right? Our laws allow for parents who waste their money, blow their money on stupid stuff, and make terrible choices and terrible decisions to ruin the life of their children and grandchildren. So when you look at it in totality, what you find is that Moses' law was both progressive in some aspects, like with debt forgiveness, and conservative in other aspects, or libertarian, and I would call it liberal. Liberal in the sense of traditional liberalism. It was liberal in other aspects. All right. So that is Joseph's strategy. There was an article by MSN News on MSN.com about a NFL broadcaster or game broadcaster by the name of Cris Collinsworth, who is right now under incredible attack by the social media cancel crowd because he said something. Let me read you his comment. It was just, you won't believe this when I read it to you. If you haven't seen this already, what he said is just really just, it's beyond the pale. It's beyond the pale. He said, let me find it here. Where'd it go? Oh, here we go. He says this during a broadcast in the midway through the second quarter of some NFL game that he was calling. He says, everyone's a fan in this city. He's talking about Pittsburgh. Excuse me. He's talking about Pittsburgh and how everybody in Pittsburgh is a fan, he says. In particular, now wait for it. This is where it gets really, you might want to cover your children's ears. In particular, the ladies that I met, they had really specific questions about the game. I was like, wow, just blown away by how strong the fans are here in this town. Oh, can you believe it? He suggested on live television, on national television, the National Football League, he suggested that women might not know as much about football as men, meaning the average woman is less interested and less knowledgeable about football than the average man. Oh, no! How could you say such a thing? And he's being lambasted for saying this, for being impressed that women know a lot about football. So the fact that he is admitting that he had the opinion previously had the opinion that women were less knowledgeable about football, and now he is impressed and amazed and gives them their props that they are actually more knowledgeable than he in his ignorance knew. And this is somehow terrible. And so he has come out to apologize. Now, I'll tell you right now, no matter what I say on this podcast, I am never going to apologize for anything. Ever. We'll get into that some other time. But he comes out and he apologizes. And this is his apology. Today on our broadcast, I made reference to a couple of women I met in Pittsburgh who so impressed me with their football knowledge that I wanted to tell their story on the air. I know the way I phrased it insulted many. Who are these snowflakes who are so insulted by what he said? I am so sorry. See, you have to add the so in there. You can't just say, I'm sorry. I apologize if you're so stupid that insulted you. No. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. What I intended as you have to read it with the proper emotion. I am so sorry. What I intended as a compliment to the fans of Pittsburgh became an insult. I'm sick about insulting any fan, but especially female fans and journalists. So now we know who was upset. There was some female journalist who says, well, I know more about football than any man. Nobody said you didn't. Nobody said you didn't. He didn't say that women are genetically unable to understand football. He said the average woman, in his view previously, knew less about football than the average man. Does anybody dispute this? If you had 100 people, 50 men and 50 women, in a room, and you were told, pick 10 people who you believe can answer difficult questions about football. Are you picking any women? Any at all? Are you going to pick any woman in that group? I mean, be honest. What if you had to bet your house on it? What if you had to wager your house on it? Are you picking any women? I don't think so. Even though it is statistically possible that in that particular group, every woman in that group knows more than every man. It is possible, but it's not statistically likely. How many women have any of you spoken to that know deeply what's going on a football field or care? Now, the NFL likes to say, they like to trot out their statistics and say that women are almost half of their fan base. And the NFL has been really pushing, trying to get women to be fans of the NFL because they're running out of men, right? White men are fans of the NFL, or at least before the whole BLM thing started. But before that, the white males were like 70% of their fan base. Well, once you reach a certain level, you're not going to get any. The white men who are not already watching football, they're not going to watch football. These are the men who aren't interested in football, and you're not going to make any inroads there. You have saturated your market. So you have to open up new markets, right? And that's why NFL is trying to get into other countries. That's why they're funding football for youth in other countries at a very large rate, because they're trying to open up their marketplace into Mexico, into England, into other places that don't, most other countries aren't interested in American football. Maybe it's because they like their children without concussions, right? I always order my children without concussions. Hold the concussions, please. Hold the concussions. Anyways, so they're trying to open up the marketplace. They're trying to open up a new market that isn't saturated. So they're trying to get women interested in football, and they've been more successful. They figure about 42% of their fan base are female now, which is something. I mean, that's what, 58 men, 58% of men, 42% of women. I wonder what all the non-binary genders, how they're represented in football. But anyways, I digress. However, he didn't say he was surprised that women liked football. He was surprised that women had a deep understanding of football. So he is talking about more than just the average fan who goes to a game, wears a jersey, and cheers for a team, and knows what a first and second and third and fourth down is. He's talking about really complicated questions, deep, probing, penetrating questions about football. How many women do you think fit that category statistically? Well, according to the NFL, only 14% of their fan base are females who would be considered avid fans. And I wonder if we take that 40% number, that 42% that they say is the female fan base of the NFL, and we adjust that down, taking out all the women who are watching it because their boyfriend is watching it, I wonder how many are left. I mean, honestly, how many are left? How many women are turning on the game when they're at home by themselves in their PJs? Come on. You know they're watching some stupid Matthew McConaughey rom-com that they've seen 115 times. They're not watching the NFL. Oh, that was so sexist. Oh, I'm aghast. 14% of the NFL's avid fans, or 14% of the NFL's fans are avid female fans. Now, you want to know something else that I found interesting when I was looking at this? You would think that men in America are interested in the NFL. That's what you would think, but it isn't the case. The NFL is predominantly followed by white males. That interesting? Black men are very underrepresented as NFL fans. So they're playing in the NFL, but they're not watching the NFL. Now that's interesting. Anyways, so I threw that in there because if my sexism wasn't sufficient to make you not want to watch this show, then maybe my racism is. Because obviously that's racist to even have seen. I mean, I didn't make up the stats. I didn't invent them. I just read the NFL's website where they break down their fan base and demographics, and all I did was quote it. But because it somehow might be disparaging in some way that nobody can even explain, might be disparaging to a minority, then it must be racist. So maybe that if I couldn't offend you with my sexism, then maybe I offended you with my racism. And speaking of sexism, I mean, if I didn't fully offend you with my sexism, let's go to this category, Alex. Feminist Fantasies for 1,000, please. So I don't know if any of you have seen the Netflix show Queen's Gambit. Love that show. I really did like the show a lot. And for some of you Christians who are very, very holy, the fact that I even laid eyes on it and watched it has offended you already. And for that, I'm happy. But I liked Queen's Gambit. I thought it was a great, great show by Netflix. Really enjoyed it. I enjoyed Queen's Gambit the same way I enjoy all the other shows where feminists get to live out a completely unrealistic fantasy. Right? So you get to see some woman beating up 4 men. I like those. I like kick butt women action films. Love them. Love them. Because I love fantasy. I love to watch things. I don't watch TV to see what's real. So I like it when they make, like, you know, Lara Croft, Tomb Raider. Women get to pretend that they can be Indiana Jones. They can't be Indiana Jones. Only men can be Indiana Jones for real. We know Indiana Jones is a documentary. It's based on a true story. But women want to pretend they can be Indiana Jones. And so they have their movies where they pretend that they can beat up men and that they can shoot a gun straight. They get to pretend these things. Okay. Well, in Queen's Gambit, they get to pretend that they can be top-notch chess players. Female fantasy for 1,000. In all seriousness, look, if you think I'm a horrible sexist, you need to go watch my videos on women. I joke. However, it is interesting to me, and I've been puzzling about this for many years since I first became aware of it and been looking into it, and I haven't been able to really find an answer. There have been no female chess champions, world champions, meaning competing against men. Now, there have been some very good women. There have been some grandmasters, female grandmasters. In fact, at one time, the youngest grandmaster ever was a woman. So, you know, she was very good, very good. And this is Judith Polar, I think her name is, Hungarian. She at some point in time beat most every male grandmaster in a game. But she's never placed higher or never was higher than 8th place, and she's never won or even placed in a world championship. And that's very strange, isn't it? That chess and poker, for that matter, is the same way. Poker's the same thing. That women don't do well in these games. And you could say that women don't do well in NFL because of their physical size, their body size, right? We had that female kicker who kicked for a college team. It was a huge thing about that. Everybody was celebrating that, and so was I. I think it's great. A woman kicking on a team, and she was very ecstatic about it, and good for her, and good for her family. But I mean, if she went down and tried to tackle the running back, she would probably end up really hurt. I mean, women just don't have the body size to compete in the NFL. So you would say, well, of course women aren't going to be in those kind of sports, right? Competing against men. But why can't they? Why haven't they been able to compete against men in chess or in poker? I don't know. I don't know. And I don't know that they never, I'm not saying they won't be able to in the future. As chess becomes more popular and shows like Queen's Gambit, which has increased sales of chessboards, ridiculous. I mean, chessboards are going up. Everybody wants to play chess now because they think their daughter's going to be like the protagonist of Queen's Gambit. And if you get enough women playing chess, you will come across the ones that have skill. And when you get enough of them who have skill, you will find the ones who have the drive. You will find the ones that have the ambition. So, my hope is that, yeah, absolutely, that women will compete with men at parity in chess and poker and other games like that, and in game, because those games closely mirror the competition in business, right? The competition for CEO and COO and high-paying, high-flying jobs and things like that. I hope that women that have the skill to do that will have the opportunities to do so, and it'll be opportunities that will be brought about naturally without coercion of the government. We don't need to cancel anybody. We don't need to force anyone to apologize and accuse anybody of sexism, racism, or anything else in order for this to happen. We just need to encourage more people to look at their options. So I hope that Queen's Gambit does that. I really do. All right. Well, we can't end the show without some comments about election fraud. Definitely need to talk about the election fraud. It is in the news. At least it's in some news, depending on which news you watch, right? It's not in, for some news outlets, they're like, election fraud, what? Where? What? And for other news outlets, that's all there is election news fraud. Now, in case you're not aware, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. And so I am not convinced that there was any fraud at all. And by any fraud at all, I don't mean that you're not going to find 1,000 ballots somewhere that somebody did wrong, or you're not going to find 100 people here or there voting after they were dead, or things like that. Sure. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about significant enough fraud to actually change the outcome of the election. I'm not convinced that there was. I have not seen enough evidence that has happened. I haven't. Now, if you're watching the news outlets that talk breathlessly and endlessly about fraud in the election, well, then you probably think that that's there. I've looked at the evidence. I've actually played with the numbers, and I don't find that level of fraud happening. Anyways, let's talk a moment about election fraud. So we have an election coming up in Georgia. Very important election. It's going to determine who has the Senate, whether the Democrats have the Senate or the Republicans. And we have Republican numbskulls down in Georgia telling Republican voters not to even vote. Don't even vote, they're saying. You can't trust the election process. Just don't even vote. Are you kidding me? What idiot came up with this strategy? Oh, wait, I know. The same idiots who are out there on Facebook, out there on Twitter, out there on the news, telling Republicans to not vote by mail. To not vote by, I'm not going to vote. I'm not voting by mail. My family's not voting by mail. No one vote by mail. Why were any of you saying this? You say, well, I don't agree with mail-in voting. Either do I. Either do I. I don't agree. Give you an example. I don't agree with a designated hitter in baseball. But if you're going to play in baseball in the American League, then you can't abstain from the designated hitter. You're putting yourself at a disadvantage. You have to play by the rules that are in place. Republicans should have been getting everybody and their brother, sister, and dog to vote by mail. You want the Democrats to be against mail-in voting the way they're against gerrymandering now? Do you know how the Republicans got the Democrats to flip on gerrymandering, and now they want to put an end to it? By doing it better than them. So the Democrats want mail-in voting. Fine. That's going to be the rules? That's the rule? So the rule is that when you get knocked out of bounds, you can run 20 more yards down outside the sideline and it's still good. Okay. If that's the rule, don't be a purist about that, you idiot. Get everyone and your brother to go vote by mail. Maybe if Donald Trump would have got 130 million votes by mail, the Democrats would have decided mail-in voting's not so good no more. You want Democrats to be against immigration? Illegal immigration? Figure out how to get all the illegals to vote for Republicans. They will shut down the border so fast. You want to see a wall being built? They will build a wall out of their own bodies if it kept Republican voters out of the country. Why do you think Democrats don't want Cubans in the country? Because they vote Republican. So you want to talk about voter fraud? What about Republican voter fraud? Look, if you are registered to vote in Georgia, vote, vote, vote. If they have mail-in voting, vote by mail. Get everyone you know to send in a mail-in ballot. All Republicans need to vote. Losing the Senate, you think that, what? What are we proving to the Democrats? I say we. What are Republicans proving to the Democrats? If they refuse to vote, we'll show you. You want to commit voter fraud? We'll show you. We won't even vote at all. We'll show you. We'll give you the Senate. That'll teach you. What are you talking about? You say, we think they're cheating. Vote more. Vote more often. Like they said, vote often. Vote Republican. One more thing, and I'll end with this that I thought about. Have you noticed the difference between U.S. election fraud and election fraud anywhere else in the world? There's a huge difference. Let's say, just for the sake of argument, that there was huge election fraud happened in the U.S. in 2020. That's just for sake of argument. Do you notice the type of election fraud we're talking about? Everywhere else in the world. So if you went to Mexico and said, man, our election was very, very fraudulent. Our election was just really, really, really fraudulent. Do you know what the average Mexican would have in his mind? That the sitting president stole the election so he could be reelected. You would say, no. That's not what happened. The challenger stole the election. Oh, well, he must be a general then. He must be a vice president. He must be somebody in the government. No. He's an 80-year-old man who's retired. Hasn't been in the government for 4 years. What? Because in the rest of the world, when there's election fraud, it's done by the people in power. They're the only ones who can have their hands on the levers. They control it. No one else can do fraud. It's out of their hands. That's the beauty of the Federalist American system, or the American Federalist system. In our country, the president actually has no power to commit fraud because we have decentralized voting. It's not even in the states or the counties. It's in precincts. Do you know how many people live in a precinct? A couple thousand? A few thousand if it's a big precinct? Not very many. These precincts are very small. And voter fraud has to happen in every one of them. In Mexico, it's all federalized. It's all nationalized. One guy sitting there can change the vote for the entire nation. In one spot. He doesn't even have to leave his office in Mexico City to do it. So it's a brilliant system. Tremendously brilliant system. Now, is it possible that the Democrats figured out a way to game that system? Sure. It's possible. And probably at some level, they have done that. And probably Republicans also. They're just never as good at it as the Democrats, right? It's kind of like what Jesus said. Jesus, when he looked at Republicans and Democrats, when he looked at Republicans and Democrats, he bemoaned the poor Republicans and said that the children of light are in their generation dumber than the children of darkness. And I'll leave you with that. It is December 4th, 2020. In our generation. Subscribe if you haven't. Follow me on Facebook at Freeborn Podcast, and take care.